You may now open the folds in front of you.
This circle represents the full flying range of the Vulcan. Extensive search has failed to locate any evidence of either a crash or landing.
My dear Prime Minister, 2 atomic bombs.
Thunderball, a gargantuan multi-million-dollar production shot around the world. The spectacular James Bond adventure created a frenzy upon release during Christmas 1965 as one of the most eagerly awaited films in cinema history. The story of Thunderball begins in 1952 on the north shore of Jamaica, where Ian Fleming created the dashing secret agent 007. The first novel, Casino Royale, sold so poorly it was renamed when issued as a US paperback. Yet Fleming was always interested in taking James Bond to the movies, in spite of the lackluster performance of this 1954 television production.
Look, would you get me some chips?
Why, certainly, Mr. Bond.
By the late 50s, Bond book sales heated up. The world hungered for the suave modern hero with a taste for martinis, danger, and sex.
I mean, sex is a perfectly respectable subject as far as Shakespeare is concerned, and I don't see why it shouldn't be so far as I'm concerned.
And I think it was Fleming who was asked what sort of makes a good thriller. Give Bond the right clothes, the right background, and the right girls, and then you've got a first-class thriller.
Ian Fleming and his wealthy friend Ivar Bryce decided the time was right for a James Bond film. The earliest written material on Thunderball began with this man, Ernest Cuneo, a longtime friend. Over the next 8 months, Fleming worked with a young filmmaker named Kevin McClory and a screenwriter, Jack Whittingham. Fleming eventually became bored and irritated with the screenwriting process. He returned to Goldeneye, his Jamaican home, and wrote his 8th James Bond novel, basing the story on the abandoned screen treatment. In March of 1961, Kevin McClory saw an advance copy of Thunderball, the novel, and decided some of the story material used was his. McClory filed suit. Fleming could not be worried. Other more promising film deals were in the works. A Canadian producer, Harry Saltzman, took an option on the James Bond novels, and another producer, Albert Cubby Broccoli, also hunted around for the rights. The two men joined forces and approached United Artists. The producers hired Richard Maybaum to adapt Thunderball.
We had wanted to do Thunderball as the very first picture, but the rights were not available to us. They weren't clean, and our lawyers advised us not to do it. But that time we wanted to do it.
The producers tabled the project and commenced production on Dr. No.
I won't go into the legal side of it, but Kevin always maintained that he and the man who had written the script, called Jack Whittingham, owned the rights jointly with Ian Fleming, who, of course, created and owned the character, Mr. Bond. The case did get to the High Court in London. It was settled out of court.
Sean Connery became a superstar in the role of Agent 007, and Broccoli and Saltzman had him. A deal was struck in 1964.
And we made a deal with Kevin to make the picture, and Kevin was the producer.
Cubby and Kevin McClory came out to ask me to do Thunderball, and I was drained of ideas. I was very fond of Bond, but felt that I had nothing to contribute until I'd recharged batteries.
Fortunately, Terence Young, the immensely successful director of Dr. No and From Russia with Love, was available. Bond screenwriter Richard Maybaum, the master of plotting, and British playwright John Hopkins wrote the new Thunderball script.
From the time I was called on a Bond to the time we started shooting was 6 months plus. As he became more successful, I had a very expert team working with me. So they knew what was required. They knew my type of designing.
It was a very complimentary team. Ken Adams' contribution is so blatant. I mean, just progressively through the films as he made them.
But the story contained a major challenge. 25% of the screen time takes place underwater.
I was working at Ivan Tors Studios in Miami. We did the Flipper TV series and other shows for Ivan Tors. And Cubby Broccoli contacted Ivan about shooting the underwater sequences for Thunderball. So I went to England, met Cubby Broccoli, and I told him of the things that we had done underwater for Ivan and other shows, and we got the job.
Well, at that time, nobody had ever done anything like this. They'd never built a set underwater. Ken breezed into the office one day and said, "Oh, we're going to do Thunderball." So I said, "You better learn to swim underwater."
While crew members became acquainted with the aqualung, the producers were facing their own unique challenge, casting. The role of Domino, the kept woman of Emilio Largo, would be the most complex and demanding of any female lead yet in a Bond film.
I hoped you'd not be so obvious.
Well, when one has little time, one sort of has to be obvious.
Hundreds of actresses vied for the role, amongst them Julie Christie, Raquel Welch, and Faye Dunaway.
They brought in many, many girls. There must have been at least 100, 150. And I tested for the leading lady, for the leading character, the one that Claudine finally ended up playing.
Possessing the perfect balance of innocence and sex appeal, former Miss France, Claudine Auger, landed the key role of Domino.
And so they said, well, we have good news and we have bad news. He said, the bad news, he says that you didn't get the role of the leading lady. The good news, he says that you're going to play the antagonist. And I said, yeah, because I think that those are the most fun roles to play.
Aren't you in the wrong room, Mr. Bond?
Not from where I'm standing.
Of course, the sex appeal of James Bond required more than two incredibly alluring women in the cast.
Behave yourself, Mr. Bond.
The test was exciting for me, and I was very nervous since I'd never actually been on a sound stage before. In another corner of the studio, I saw this very tall, handsome man, and I remember Terence Young said to me, "Darling, of course you know Sean, don't you?" Well, I'd never met Sean in my life. I was quite overawed by this.
Oh, no.
007.
The rest of the Bond team was back as well.
It was really like a big family. Every time we started a new film and the family was together, we all hugged each other, and we knew we were going to do something, that was going to be enormously successful.
We shot it, I think, under schedule because of that. The technicians were brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
All right, action!
Principal photography began on February the 16th, 1965, in Annay, France, coinciding with the French premiere of Goldfinger, whose pre-credit sequence had audiences worldwide cheering. So every effort was made to see that the opening of Thunderball had all the right ingredients of elegance, adventure, and, of course, gadgets. The Bell Textron rocket pack had been developed for the Army for battlefield use. The only two men qualified to fly the amazing machine were brought to France to perform the 21-second flight.
No well-dressed man should be without one.
Yes, very practical.
Pilot Bill Suter remembers being politely asked to fly without a helmet because it was felt Bond would look more debonair without headgear. Knowing the risks, the pilot refused. Fire hoses rigged beneath the Aston Martin drenched the stuntmen in this sequence. Rough work considering temperatures remained well below freezing. Of course, the crew also knew it would be taking enormous calculated risks.
We did the filming of Count Lippy's Demise at Silverstone Racing Circuit in Northampton, England. We had the BSA, Lightning it was called. Bob Simmons was driving the Ford Fairlane, and Bob was lying down virtually on the road, and we fixed the steering mechanism up for him.
He was a very nice man, Bob. I'd had him as a stuntman many years earlier on other pictures, He was one of the people I insisted on having on the film. Luciana Paluzzi is riding this motorbike with a rocket, and she fires into the car, and the car has to leave the road.
Johnny Walker went to fire the rockets, told Bob when to hit the explosion in the car, worked it out in great detail. The vehicles were going really, really fast. The bike was doing over 100 miles an hour.
We did several rehearsals of the thing, and I was trying to get to go faster and faster.
The rockets were fired, big explosion, the skyline went off the road, and Bob wasn't there. So, God, where is he? We thought he was under the car. We didn't know what happened to him.
I didn't see Bob leave the car, which he should have done. And we're very cold-blooded directors. I let the thing run on until I'd got the shot. And then I ran in front of the camera and raced down the hill where, and I couldn't find Bob.
Terence said, "Well, where the hell is he? What's wrong, Bob? Where are you?" Everybody was really panicking. And the voice behind Terence said, "How was that, Gov?" Terence said, "Don't you ever do that again." He said, "You nearly gave me a heart attack."
So, you know, he was alive. You established that.
These rare shots from the American television special, The Incredible World of James Bond, reveals just how narrow Bob Simmons' escape really was.
What the Bonds did, they stimulated my imagination. I felt the sky was a limit. I could do anything.
Ken Adams' crew faced the challenge of bringing Bond's world to the Bahamas. Everything about the film grew to larger-than-life proportions.
On Thunderball, we needed a yacht. The rear part was designed like a catamaran. The actual hydrofoil, we bought it for, I think, $10,000, had it shipped to Miami. And then the whole conversion was done by 3M Shipyard in Miami. All my naval advisors thought it wouldn't work because the catamaran part of it was attached to the hydrofoil by two 1-inch slip bolts. And that was the only thing that held those two hulls together because they had to move independently. And then once the slip bolts were pulled out, the hydrofoil just sped away. What was amazing on all the Bonds, but it started on Thunderball when I had to design a lot of underwater craft and so on. I just designed them. And I thought nobody could ever realize these designs and that they weren't practical. And we found this expert on mini submarines in Miami, Jordan Klein. And he said, no, we can build that. And that gave me a great deal of confidence because I found in subsequent Bonds that whatever I designed, somebody in the world was able to realize these designs and make them practical.
Desperate to make a Christmas release, the backbreaking schedule required Jordan Klein and his construction crew to sleep in shifts to meet the deadline.
They should have got more recognition for the sets and for special effects and all sorts of things in the Bond films, and they really did.
On March the 22nd, 1965, 102 actors and technicians and 12.5 tons of equipment flew to Nassau. The tiny island never recovered.
Now it was grand. James Bond was now grand. I mean, it was like the biggest thing to hit the world. I mean, it was the Beatles and James Bond.
The best of the best was at our disposal. I remember our dressing rooms when we were working on the streets, the carnival scenes. We had a yacht. They rented a yacht on which we would go between takes. When we had to work on a beach, they would have tents. Champagne would be there and the best of wine. That was Terence anyway. That was his style, and that was the way that things were done. So I worked on rougher pictures, but Thunderball was definitely the easiest.
Well, easy for some. Creating the effect of a full-sized Vulcan bomber which sinks to the bottom of the ocean required a little espionage by the production design staff.
The nuclear weapons, at that time, nobody really knew what they looked like. And Ken and I were invited to Bomber Command one night. We went down to their Holy of Holies, and the squadron leader who was showing us around said, all the questions that you've asked me, if you look, all the answers are here.
Peter Lamont used these hidden camera shots to design the nuclear weapons in Thunderball.
Anyway, we boxed everything up and we carted it off to the Bahamas, and on a little wharf there, we started to build the Vulcan.
I supplied certain equipment which came from certain people in this country who, once again, we have dealt with on a regular basis. And we were able to supply the control mechanism, bomb releases, and that type of thing.
I sat up there for about 2 or 3 weeks and I did all the dressing myself.
For some, the challenges were more than technical.
I'd been in England for so long that I was grey. When I finally got the role, Terence said, now, darling, you have to go and get yourself a tan. So, we're going to call you every day, and you're going to go out, and you're going to get to be an island girl. So that's what they did. They called me every morning, and I sunned myself for 2 weeks before I started to get my island girl look. What a job.
During the shooting, we had about 150 journalists who came, and for 2 weeks we were working and doing interviews at the same time. It was so pleasant to work on that picture because they already knew that they were going to have a success.
Sean Connery lived under a microscope as James Bond. With hordes of fans and reporters following his every move, Connery had to discover some way of keeping focused on his work. During the Nassau shoot, he granted only one major interview, Playboy magazine.
He obviously had a highly developed sense of, shall we say, drama.
Instead, Connery worked closely with Terence Young to make certain this Bond lived up to expectations.
I think he got the point.
Well, Sean was the easiest person I've ever worked with.
He always liked to joke and laugh, and sometimes it was a little bit off when you're sort of standing there trying to be terribly serious and he was goosing you. Or he's pulling faces when he's giving you a line, he's pulling faces, he's doing, you know, this stuff, and you're going, oh, God.
Trying to be a little less than your usual frivolous self, 007.
Sean, he was so good in what he was doing that he was easy just to be caught in his rhythm. So he just came all very natural.
But he was fun. He was fun and he was really terrific to work with. That's Sean and I. There's our relationship right there.
What sharp little eyes you've got.
Wait till you get to my teeth.
Of course, some scenes were still a little tense.
So when I needed sharks for a villa I'd found there, which had 2 pools, I rang up Miami and in one night fished 15 sharks, and they were craned in and put into one of the pools. Sean was very reluctant to be in the pool together with the sharks, so I designed like a corridor out of plexiglass so that the shark was behind the plexiglass and Sean was on the other side of it.
And I said, the only way the sharks can get in is if they can jump in the air like a dolphin. He said, well, how do I know sharks can't? I said, you have my word for it. He says, not good enough.
What I didn't tell Sean is that I could only get so much plexiglass and one 4x8 sheet was missing. So there was a 4-foot gap.
And of course, underwater, you can't see anything. And I went to go underwater to do my first entrance to swim past the shark.
But as always happened, the shark went straight down the corridor and went out through the 4-foot gap.
And believe me, the shot we have in the picture, Sean Connery is not acting.
We were watching horrified from the top and told Sean to get out as quickly as possible.
And I got out of the water without, I think I was dry when I touched the side.
And I've never seen somebody leave a pool at the speed that Sean did.
I don't know whose fault it was, but it didn't happen again.
For this sequence, stuntman Bill Cummings demanded £250 extra hazard pay before he would agree to land atop a live shark. John Steers rigged up a dead shark with a trace wire for this shot of Connery exiting the pool, but getting the effect proved to be its own adventure. To set up, Steers had to drag the shark into place by hand.
So anyhow, I got in there and I started pulling this thing back. I was very dubious, and Terence says, oh, back a bit further, John, back a bit further. And I suddenly realised I was right in the middle of the pool by this time, and sharks were all around me. So Terence said, that's fine, we'll do it from there, John. And just as he said that, this dead shark leapt away from me. It went straight towards another one that's swimming around. And it opened its mouth, and this other shark thought the shark was going for him, and that was it. The next thing I knew, I was being pushed out of the water by these seething sharks, and the water now was blood red. All Terence was saying, turn the cameras, it's fantastic, it's fantastic. I said, get me out of here.
The only dramatic part of all this is that my wife refused to go to bed with me for 2 weeks afterwards because she said, you stink of shark, of rotten fish. She said, go and sleep somewhere else.
But the biggest, riskiest, most spectacular scene was yet to come. After weeks of rehearsal, 60 divers using more than $85,000 worth of diving equipment created the stunning underwater jihad. Director Riku Browning choreographed the action.
We would rehearse the sequences topside aboard this huge barge that we had rented. And then we would try to recreate what we rehearsed on the surface underwater. And in those days, we really didn't have underwater communication like we have today. So we used hand signals.
To film the subaquatic action, producers hired Lamar Boren, a key developer of underwater cinematography. Engineer Jordan Klein worked with special effects supervisor John Steers to create the illusion of a saltwater battleground. Terence Young and the underwater team tried to film every imaginable form of mayhem. Stuntman Frank Cousins doubled for Sean Connery for much of the sequence. To achieve this effect, a wire attached the stuntman to a speedboat on the surface. And of course, there had to be sharks. All real, and this time all very much alive.
We had to learn kind of hit and miss of how to handle them so you don't get hurt. And we found that the tiger shark was better to work with in that if you let him go, he would kind of go in a straight line. But if you had a lemon shark or a bull shark and you let them go, sometimes they just turn, like right now, they're facing you. And that's not too groovy, you know, seeing those chompers. As the guys say, the man in the gray suit's coming for you.
Divers placed wires through the shark's fins to control their movements, keeping the rest of the crew in relative safety. For the climax, the filmmakers needed more military equipment than some real-life invasions. To assemble the firepower and manpower necessary, Broccoli and Saltzman turned to Lieutenant Colonel Charles Rouchon.
Now, this tie is rather unique, but it was given to us on Thunderball by a remarkable man called Colonel Charles Rouchon, who used to get lots of gadgets for us from the American Army and Navy.
We had a Mr. Fix, a fellow called Charlie Rouchon. He got everybody into Fort Knox and around there, and he did amazing things. And I've seen things work in high places.
Rouchon not only amassed an armada for Thunderball's climax, he also helped in securing the Skyhook Sea Rescue equipment and a few other extras.
I had got Charlie Rouchon, who was our American contact, to get me some deviant of rocket fuel, some of the stuff which they were experimenting with, and I didn't know how powerful it was. I hadn't got a clue. And I had no chance to test it because the stuff had arrived the night before. So it really was suck it and see. And I hit the TX, and I just couldn't believe what happened. I mean, the thing just disappeared in front of our eyes. I didn't know where the boat had gone to. I thought it just vaporized it. I looked up, and there was a little black pinpoint in the sky. And I said, I don't know where you guys, but the boat is coming down on top of us, and there's nowhere to go. And I looked up, and by this time you can see that it's perfectly round, this thing, and it's all bits and pieces. Very nasty mess coming down. When we got back to 30 miles back to Nassau, all the windows were out in Bay Street. We'd taken all the windows out. That's 30 miles away. It's only the fact that we were right on top of it, laying down, that the blast went right over us. Must have been the biggest explosion ever in a movie picture, ever.
After the crews returned to Pinewood Studios in May of 1965, one major, brutal sequence remained. The final fight aboard the Disco Volante, which was recreated on a soundstage.
We shot some of it in the real boat, and then we had to put the boat up in the studio on rockers and all that, and I think it was worse in the studio than it was on the boat.
Staging fierce combat on a runaway hydrofoil took weeks of careful planning by Terence Young, editor Peter Hunt, and a stunt team.
All right, here we go now. Action! Land! Got it!
Terence Young staged his action for maximum impact. Peter Hunt introduced a new style of editing, breaking all the rules. With Ted Moore's Technicolor cinematography and John Barry's amazing musical score, all the ingredients fell into place, making Thunderball into a film that still thrills viewers.
I'm glad I killed him.
You're glad.
Got it!
Bloody good. No, I know, but it's all right. You all right, Sean? Bloody good.
Bloody good.
Thunderball opened on December the 21st, 1965, smashing box office records.
Here comes the biggest Bond of all. Thunderball.
James Bond mania hit a fever pitch. 30 years later, Thunderball still amazes and thrills viewers. The film's remarkable achievements transformed James Bond into more than a popular fictional hero. He became, and remains, a phenomenon.